Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and thanks for stopping by. Our dedicated team will guide you through with the latest updates and theories at Starbase, Texas. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon for future streams.
Hey everyone, my name is Zach Golden and welcome to another Starbase Weekly live stream. Happy to be here with y'all this week. As always, we have a lot to cover today, and great news for this week. We finally have a fully stacked tower, so that's exciting. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. Joining me today, I have Ryan Hansen Space.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. And as Zach said, we've got a lot of exciting photos here to share today. So sit back and relax while we kind of detail out all the changes observed at Starbase over the past week.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for being here, Ryan. Really appreciate it. Ryan and I were both up fairly late last night, so hopefully we're not sounding too tired today. But also, we do have Astro Joe in the building with us today, so welcome, Astro Joe.
Thanks, Zach. Good to be back. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Starbase friends around the world. Let's jump into episode 130.
Yeah, it's crazy, crazy already being up in 1:30. Yeah, hopefully y'all noticed the awesomeness of this shot right here. I always love when Mauricio gets these wide angle shots, and sometimes it's hit or miss in the morning because obviously you have all these clouds up in the air and whatnot, but they definitely did a great job getting some awesome photos for today. And we actually have some cool shots from inside of the plane. Mauricio is flying with his pilot, and sorry, I accidentally just forgot his name. Fred. So I haven't met him myself, but his name is Fred. And yeah, this is a nice shot Mauricio got from the air. I think this is over Harlingen, possibly. But this is Fred. So shout out to Fred for helping Mauricio get all these awesome images. I know in the past, some of us have, sometimes we will only get like low altitude images, and other times, we're only going to get high altitude images. I think usually that's kind of what we shoot for. But this time, okay, went to the wrong image. Got a good mix of both, so it's really nice being able to see different angles of both the launch site and build site. Because once you get down low, it kind of opens up a few more details that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise. So with that, we will go ahead and start this week's show, and I will go ahead and send us over to Massie's, where finally we do have some news to share here because they're not done with the expansion of this, but they are getting a lot closer. If you guys can see just behind here, they actually have 3 new tanks that arrived this week. And hold on one second. Okay, sorry about that. Just trying to get my little thumbnail bar up here. But yeah, so these 3 tanks that we mentioned last week during the show actually ended up arriving, I think the day after. So I remember BJ during that show was looking up the manifest for the Port of Brownsville, and we thought these were 3 days out, and then ended up showing up literally the next day after that show. So crazy timing on that. But they now are at the Massie site, all 3 liquid oxygen tanks. So this is quite a large expansion of commodities here. We actually have, so these are 4 liquid oxygen tanks. Then you have, I believe these are 3 additional liquid oxygen tanks. And then all the ones down here are nitrogen. And then you have your methane storage up here. So a little bit of methane, a whole lot of liquid oxygen, and some nitrogen here. So yeah, kind of crazy how much storage they have down here, especially given their current cadence of testing. But I think that's all about to step up here soon. There's been a bit of a lull, I would say, with both stacking Starships, I guess technically with launches, since we're kind of exceeding the time that a lot of people were expecting the next launch to happen in. But also just general cryo testing and all the structural verification tests. So yeah, I think things are about to start picking up here soon. And on that note, as y'all can see, we do have a oh man, I'm forgetting that this one is 16 or 14. Yeah, test tank 14.
Test tank 16, I believe. Yep, too many numbers.
Yeah, 14 is the one at at Sanchez currently, so we'll also be talking about that one today. I don't know why I always get them confused. I'm used to having more distinct names for them,
Yeah, so this is the one that they brought out, and they, I believe, filled with some cryo fluid within this test article. And I think we're maybe thinking that that original test wasn't exactly for structural verification, but more so making sure that all the systems for this stand were set up correctly, so they could fill and detank. And then test tank 16 actually went back to the production site, and they probably did some additional work on it. I think we've seen some hints that there's some additional componentry on it, but now it's back out here, and it does look like they're getting ready to maybe kick off a testing campaign for this tank.
Yeah, and on that note, we do have, we were kind of watching out for this, just so we could see how all of this was going to be set up, but they did end up putting the cap, which was originally used on the can crusher, they did end up mounting that up here. And it doesn't look like they've connected the pistons yet to...
No, I don't believe they're connected. They're kind of hanging currently.
Yeah, I wonder what they use to move those into place. Probably just like chain hoists or something like that. But yeah, so they're just basically getting set up with this test structure right now. So you have the, I think there's 5 linear actuators that are basically going to be pulling down on the cap here. And then they also have, I think, 20 of them below. It could be more, but at least 20 below, which are also intended to attach onto this cap. So I think the theory that we kind of mentioned last week is they may want to push and pull in different directions. But I don't know. This is still a bit confusing to me, just because of the fact that you could essentially accomplish the same thing just with these pistons on the bottom, I feel like. So
yeah, I think they may be trying to kind of compartmentalize the different introductions of forces. So they can basically pull equally, across the bottom to simulate the mass of the ship and its propellant during flight as it's kind of jetting forward. And then they can also pull maybe asymmetrically at the top in order to induce different sideways forces that they may experience in flight that aren't directly related to the vertical compression through the vehicle.
Yeah, this is the one thing I that kind of sucks about this testing being at Massey's is that these are um, actually kind of interesting to watch, especially when you take the footage and you change the speed to like 1,000% of what its original speed is. You can kind of see a lot of the actual like pulling of the hydraulic pistons, and sometimes you can even see effects on the actual vehicle as well too, or the test tank. Sorry. Um, so that's the one thing that's unfortunate about this testing being at Massey's is that uh, number one, sometimes it's hard to even know when it's happening because if they're not using if they're not filling it up with liquid nitrogen or something like that, then it's really difficult to tell when it's happening, if not impossible. But yeah, I'm sure we'll probably see that test coming up here soon within the next few weeks. And this is actually a ship aft section. So this should be testing basically a structural verification test for the version 2 of the ship. Which is interesting because, as we'll see a little bit later, they've already essentially fully stacked ship 33. So this is a test that's kind of coming after the first vehicle has already been assembled. And like I said, we'll talk about that a little more. I think there's a interesting debate on whether or not that's actually going to end up flying. I know I have my doubts, and I think Ryan does as well too. So we'll see what y'all think in the chat when we get to that. But yeah, what else do we have going on out at Massey's to mention, Ryan?
I believe maybe the last thing related to that stand is they may possibly be adding some hardware to it to introduce forces from the flaps. I haven't really seen that hardware up close, but I've heard that they are possibly going to be pushing and pulling on the vehicle around the location that the flaps attach. There's some of the um, adapters that they put on the sides of the tank for the flaps. Apparently, they've added those to Test Tank 16, and there's really no reason to do that unless you're going to obviously they're not going to put flaps on this, but they may want to use those positions to kind of test on. So we may see them attach additional hardware and linkages to do that. I can't find a photo. I've been looking all morning for a photo showing the actual bits themselves, but we may just be limited by the lighting of this flyover to be able to see those.
Yeah, I was wondering if I was actually just checking to see if I had a video of the rollout, and the ground images from last week. This wasn't out here, so not a good place to look to try and see if we could find those. Because this right now is looking. I mean, I feel like we should be able to see them because this is looking at essentially the side of the ship right here. Because well, I guess we don't really know where the QD. I'm guessing it's on the front over here. I don't even
I
know if this
believe the
test tank has
last
a QD.
time it was out here, the QD was actually faced toward the road because some of the photographers were able to get photos. I think it's actually there on the front, kind of the right front right there. I think that's actually where the QD is meant to be, um, which would kind of line up with, yeah, so you can see the holes that are cut out. So that'd be for the raceway as it goes up the side of the vehicle. So this is the QD side here. So those attachment points for the flaps would be kind of on the left and the right. Um, I haven't seen enough to see those at least from these angles.
Right. Yeah, this is a very, very interesting structure, and I think we'll probably see a lot of additional testing coming out here soon. I'm surprised they don't have a ship forward section or the nose cone section, a test article for that. especially with the position of the flaps having changed on that. And I mean, truthfully, a lot of the design for the ship's nose cone has changed. And again, we're going to end up touching on that with ship 33 here in a little bit. Yeah, do we have any questions about Massey's? I know we have some donations in the chat.
I don't really have any relevant questions for Massey's. However, I do have a couple on deck that I'm going to save for the relevant portion of the show. But I want to thank Callistia Lee and Jake Winlow for both gifting 5 memberships before the stream started, as well as Jap Kuipers gifting a membership, and Toby Woby for a $25 super chat saying, "The time is now, FAA. Love you all."
Awesome. Thank you, Astro Joe. And thank you all for the support as well, too. We appreciate all of that. It really helps out a lot, especially, with actually being able to do these flyovers in the first place, because it's not cheap. Not only is it, Mauricio going out of his way to actually get up there to take these images while also having a full-time job, but definitely have to have your schedule line up with the pilot as well, too. And also, compensating the pilot, of course, for the time. Because as y'all can see, we've did some low-level flyovers as well, too. And actually even went to the airport. I didn't really show these pictures yet. Well, I wasn't really planning to, because most of the stuff out here is kind of the same from last week. But still, just the time it takes to, circle around all of Starbase and, into Brownsville, essentially, is quite exhaustive on the gas. So yeah, we appreciate all of your support in helping Mauricio to be able to get out here and take hundreds of images from all different altitudes. So thank you all for that support.
Hey, Zach, in this photo right here, if you actually zoom in on the test tank, we can actually see one of the new bits they've added to the stand. There on the right side, there's a beam that stretches between the two verticals, and we think that's actually what they're going to attach an actuator to test the flap joints that they're gonna, or the structural attachment points for the flap that they would put on the test tank. So they may possibly put one on the other side, or I believe the stand actually isn't symmetric, so the other side may land on an actual vertical. So, but that's a new beam that they've added, which is roughly the right height for the flap attachment points. So you might see them add additional hardware in there to push and pull on the attachment point.
You actually bring up a good point that this is one of the weirdest test structures so far, because of the fact that it's not symmetrical. Because pretty much everything else out here is. I kind of wonder why they did that.
Yeah, it's interesting because for the most part, the boosters have it's either a 5, 10, or 20 symmetry, and the ships have kind of a 3, 6. So depending on whatever vehicle you're testing, your symmetry is going to be different. But yeah, it seems that they went with 5. I believe there's 5 columns for the stand here, and so it works out for boosters. It spreads the load. But yeah, it's interesting. When they make decisions for stands like this, okay, what symmetry are they actually going to choose to use?
And sorry, I'm just responding to some stuff here in the background. I also I just saw something funny in the chat. I did comment back, but I did see a mention earlier from Toby Woby, kind of saying that he thinks that SpaceX could probably fly next week if the FAA approved today. I'm actually not sure if that was related to Starship or if it was related to sending up a spare Dragon capsule or something like that. But if that was referring to Starship, I think we'll see as we go through this episode that that's maybe not necessarily the truth. I think they are not as close to being able to fly as sometimes we think they are. I know a few weeks ago, I think Elon mentioned that the vehicles were ready, but they were still waiting on the license and actual, still had things to do at the launch site itself. But I don't know. I don't think either the launch site or the vehicles are truly ready at this point. But I guess we'll look into that a little bit more when we get over there. But yeah, let's go ahead and move over to the Sanchez site. My mouse just like moved itself right there. Okay, cool. Yeah, so over here at the Sanchez site, got some interesting action going on down here. This was something that we talked about at the end of last week. Well, not the end, I guess. But yeah, during last week's show, we mentioned the cutouts here in the concrete, and earlier last week, this drilling rig, this Malcolm CFA drilling rig that was previously at the launch site, drilling tons of pilings. I think it probably drilled like over 200 so far. Took a break from that so it could come over here to do the same thing. So I think it's really tough to see them here, but I think there may be potentially up to 3 piles for each of these cutouts. Try to see at least 2 on each one. They may actually still be in the process of doing this, because typically what they'll do is move in a circle. So they'll do one here, one here, one here, and then just keep going around until they're finished. I think they just try and do that to let the concrete cure a little bit, so that they're not disturbing it as they're drilling another one adjacent to it. But yeah, so I think that's what they've done so far, is probably go around in this direction, and they have 2 on each of these, and then about to do the second on this, and then work their way around until there's possibly 3 or 4 on each pad. But yeah, this kind of leans into talk about the actual launch mount itself. So one way or another, no matter whether it's going to be a standard, or I guess I don't know if standard is the right word, but if we're going to have a launch ring like we had previously, or if it's going to be some type of mobile stand, I think either way, it's kind of looking like it's going to end up being constructed in this area. What are your thoughts on that, Ryan?
Yeah, I guess for those who haven't seen, there are photos of the gate in this area, and it does say that the Sanchez lot specifically is for building the tower sections and the launch mount. So SpaceX has pretty much told us that they're going to be building the launch mount in this area, and the size of these footings is pretty suspect. It doesn't really match anything else size-wise nearby. So it's pretty likely that they're at least going to construct a large object here and transport it to the launch site. As Zach was saying, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to be mobile, as in move back and forth between sites, forever. It may be a one and done deal like the original ring, where they build it, move it, and then it stays. But at the very least, they're beginning to build something, or at least the infrastructure here, that will allow them to build a large object. And given that they're putting footings in the ground in 4 places, it kind of lends, some credit to the theory that this mount could potentially be lifted and relocated at a later time. So originally I was pretty against the theory of a quote mobile launch mount, and we kind of have to be careful how we describe that, because I think people immediately assume that it's some sort of a crawler where the booster will roll out on it, and I think that's not what we're trying to describe with this. It's essentially a platform that can be bolted in place and unbolted and maybe moved off to the side and refurbished. So it would be kind of like the ship static fire stand, except a vehicle would not be transported on it. It simply would probably live at the launch site indefinitely, where it would undergo maybe some refurbishment every so many flights. And the fact that they're actually building some infrastructure to construct these kind of also lends to the idea that they may build multiple of them, and then have at least maybe 2, maybe 3 that they kind of cycle between. So we know that refurbishment is kind of a big part of the process right now. So it's possible that this could, suggest that that is actually what they're, planning to do.
A static fire on something low to the ground. These help them kind of learn what is needed for that. So they kind of learned a little bit about what the concrete requirements were going to be, even though it didn't necessarily directly apply over to the orbital launch mount. But then also having the mounted QD on this as well too. Sorry, let me go back
Exact.
there. Yeah.
Chat is all saying that we've got no audio. Everybody went to mute.
I do see some people
Just
saying sound is
just
back.
reported back. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. I don't know when it actually went out, so I will repeat some of what I was saying. But yeah, so essentially, I feel like these suborbital test stands were kind of like the, I guess, prototypes for what was needed on the actual orbital launch mount. So the QDs, while not necessarily retractable, are actually built into the stand. And then a lot of that stuff kind of transferred over to. This was not the best flyover to pick. A lot of that stuff kind of transferred over into the actual orbital launch mount. And so one of the other big things that kind of goes into this as well too is the cryo testing stations. So the ships initially used to be able to do cryo testing at Massey's, both ships and boosters, or sorry, not Massey's, at the launch site. So they had two cryo stations, and they were basically able to do cryo tests on the actual transport stands themselves. And that kind of backfired. Didn't they actually have? I'm trying to remember if they had the QD on the transport stand at one point.
The boosters never had. That's actually what that frame is there, because they basically held
Yeah,
the
I
pipes
think it
up.
was the.
The ship right there actually is the stand. It's kind of in line with us. You can kind of see.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's where the ship QD was. So that was basically the prototype for what they ended up doing at Massey's
yeah,
right there.
exactly. So I'm gonna close out of this really quick.
But I think overall, the process that Zach was talking about with having the two suborbital sites and how they kind of flip flop between the two of them to allow for the refurbishment is maybe something that they're kind of going back to, with the idea of this, potentially relocatable launch mount.
Yeah, and beyond that, actually, I'm gonna take a step back even. So um, the water deluge system for the orbital mount actually kind of ends up being the uh, the test of what they want their deluge system to actually be. And so I think the lessons that they learned from that kind of brought them into how this deluge system operates at Massey's. And then now here you have the flame trench um, and the actual mobile test stand. So we already know that there's going to be a flame trench at the launch site. And in my opinion, I feel like this is, their way of learning the lessons that they need to learn, figuring out exactly how they want this to look and work before doing it on the orbital scale. So I think the big difference here is that the orbital site will have a two-sided trench at least. That's what it's currently looking like. But yeah, I feel like what we're seeing here is really just a preview of what to kind of expect at the launch site. And obviously, it'll have to be protected much differently because the vehicle will actually lift off past the the test stand and all the GSE stuff. Here, I'm actually trying to look for a image from that side. There's always so many of them to go through, which is never a bad thing. But yeah, so you have this built-in QD stand, which is a massively upgraded version of what they had at the launch site next to the orbital launch mount, the cryo testing station. So I feel like something like this makes sense if you're obviously more protected. Like this thing could be shielded if they wanted to. You could have an enclosure around this entire thing, which here isn't really necessary. Like I said, because the vehicle's not leaving the pad. It's not, you don't have the exhaust plume basically brushing against this as it's clearing the pad. So this doesn't necessarily need protection. But I just imagine a version of this that's probably 2 or 3 times beefier, so that it can support an extremely heavy enclosure shielding, essentially, that will kind of be a lot more robust than what the BQD, the booster QD on the launch mount currently has. So the bigger the structure is, the easier it kind of is to protect because you can put larger steel on it, and larger hydraulic system for actuating it. So the launch site BQD is a little bit limited in my opinion because they want it to move at a certain speed when it opens and closes. So you're kind of limited on exactly how much shielding you can put on there based on what your hydraulic system can handle. Like if it's not able to open and close fast enough because you added all this extra stuff, then it's just not going to work. And I think that actually kind of happened with the hold down arms. Would you kind of agree on that, Ryan? Like they had the extra shielding on the hold down arms and they removed it. I think possibly some of that was like due to just not needing that kind of protection anymore, but also some of it could have been causing like binding on the actual hold down arms or reducing the speed that they're able to move at.
Yeah, I think Elon kind of hinted at this, fundamental, issue with the design recently with Tim's last tour, which is that the arms were binding, and presumably that's because they were relying on gravity to pull the middle pivot point of that of the upper linkages down, and that essentially could cause binding if you add too much weight too far toward the vehicle. That joint isn't going to want to naturally drop down, which is why we saw them swap out a lot of those linkages for linkages that actually had some mass around that pivot point. And yeah, they suspiciously removed.
I can pull these up here as well too, just
Yeah.
so that we are
And
able to.
they removed a bunch of the the side paneling, which didn't quite make a lot of sense at the time because it just exposes more within the ring.
Yeah, so the this is what I was looking for actually right here. The actual shielding that they had on the side of the arm. So both this right here, and then there was an enclosure in the back for the QD, which I think is actually still there. But they had this shielding on here, and then they removed it. But you were talking about the actual arms themselves binding up.
Yeah, so that upper linkage right there in the middle, that basically has to drop down when the arms pull back. And they're also a constraining linkage, meaning they're pulled basically perfectly in line, those 3 points. So, and there's nothing pulling down on that part. So they pretty much have to rely on gravity to pull that down at the beginning of the motion. Otherwise, there's the potential that either there's actually a locking part on those pieces, so they can't actually rotate upward. But there's a possibility that they don't actually retract at all. So that's basically what Elon was hinting at when talking with Tim about the design of those linkages, and so they're going to be moving away from this design on the next launch mount for sure. But
Yeah, and
in addition to that, they're learning that water is their friend. And so I expect to see something more similar to the Rainbirds at 39A to splash the top surface of this launch deck with a lot of water. And even if they splash the top of the booster QD, they're probably going to be able to protect it a lot better if they do that as well.
Yeah, and I think this type of mobile deck would potentially not necessarily need to be as large as some people are expecting. Like the actual structure itself, the legs and all that, probably going to be gigantic. But the actual deck itself can be a lot smaller than it was initially, because if you kind of see this right here, the hold down arms really don't go past. You can't even really, you barely see the backside of them right here. So everything else in the all the depth of this table is mostly for plumbing, which potentially will not need to exist on this new structure because they'll just not use this system at all, potentially. I think that would probably make the most sense, is to move away from this in particular. I think while it is one of the coolest features of the launch mount, it also is probably the part that drastically overcomplicates everything. You have, like, at one point, I think they had like 7 hoses going to each QD, so that's 7 times 20. It gets pretty crazy. Then you also have auxiliary systems in here as well for like fire suppression and nitrogen purging and all that stuff. So yeah, that was a huge tangent, but yeah, I think that getting back to the actual stand itself, so whatever, if they did a mobile stand, and right now, I mean, it does feel weird talking about it so much because we don't know what it's actually going to be, right? But based on just what we're seeing, in my opinion, this makes the most sense right now. So kind of getting into this even more, this mount is meant to sit on top of the pedestals at the Massie's trench. So you can see those right here. These are the pedestals that it's normally sitting on. I'm surprised they actually don't have a pair of them. I think they...
I think that's the temporary spot that they
Yeah,
normally
but it
put
doesn't
on.
have a way to actually bolt it down here, which
No.
isn't necessarily needed in this case, because it's you only really need it once the ship's on top of it. But so these pedestals right here kind of straddle the trench, and obviously permanently fixed in the ground. These use the actual the wall of the trench itself as its structural support, and so essentially there's kind of like 40, I think it's like maybe 60 feet long, the actual rebar cages in the walls. That's how deep they go. So for the actual orbital launch mount, you would probably need something very similar to that. And I think if you're going to actually construct that anywhere, then you need to have basically an identical base of what you're expecting that you're going to, or of what you're going to need at the actual launch site. So whatever, in my opinion, they're going to need to build at the launch site will first be built here, as far as the pilings, which are probably already completed at the launch site, honestly. The pilings for the actual base of that structure to rest on top of. And then ideally, they're going to want this to be perfectly level, which is kind of why they're going through all this preparation. You don't want to just, while you could just build it on, regular concrete, you got to worry about whether or not the actual ground is level, which I think they probably had issues with the first launch mount, right?
I believe there was a lot of shimming they had to do in order to get things level, because yeah, they basically constructed that on just uneven concrete. But yeah, even the amount of investment they're doing here with the piles and whatnot, I think it also lends a little bit of credit to possibly wanting this to be a little bit more permanent, and they may use it as essentially a jig to build multiple of them. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty much expecting to see a square or a rectangle sitting on top of at least 4 legs, and that's what they will essentially construct here.
Yeah. I'm excited, and at first I wasn't fully convinced, but now I'm kind of hoping this is the case. The more I think about it, the more I think this is the right way to go. And it's reached the point, I think, that it's weird to me that other people don't see it as well. Because I feel like, it's really just impossible to expect the kind of force that you're putting out of this booster to not just destroy everything that it comes in contact with, like whether it happens immediately or whether it happens after 5 flights. it's a massive cutting torch, and that's the only way to really describe it. So unless you have somehow invented like vibranium or something that can just deflect all of that stuff without um, being damaged, I feel like you're always going to have some sort of erosion on the surface, even if you're using water. I mean, the SLS, well, I guess that's a different situation because there was a massive overpressure that kind of messed up a lot of the structure on that mobile launcher. But even still, the actual thermal damage on the pad was extensive as well too. So it's really, really hard to protect against the kind of temperatures that are going to be faced here. And a lot of people will compare it to Falcon 9, like, oh, well, they never have to do refurbishment on the Falcon 9 launch pad. First of all, we don't really know that because we don't have access to, Falcon 9 or 39A like we do here. So we don't really know that. The only indication that they don't have that problem is just general launch cadence. But it's also a significantly smaller vehicle. What is it, like 10 times smaller? And yeah, I mean, you can't really compare the two when you're talking about protecting the launch pad. Two completely different animals.
I think a lot of people are, under the assumption that, their problems would be solved if they used a flame trench, which we know that they're going to be transitioning towards, but that's kind of only half of the equation. You still have to protect the actual deck of the launch mount, and as we've seen with the current design, there's a lot of failure points that they have to, replace between flights, and so I think, you really have to expand and think about the whole equation, and we'll see, how this goes. I'm excited to see what they build because I'm sure it will involve many lessons learned over the past couple of years with different testing sites. So I think it'll be really cool to see what they do.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this thing, it's just you can just see the thermal damage. You know what I mean? Like for one, you have all of this additional. Every launch they've added shielding onto the booster QD. Every single launch, they've got. They originally just had a regular, the top deck of the table. Now they have burn plates on the top of it. On the backside here, I think they have 2 layers from here to here and here to there. I think there's 2 layers of that plating. But I mean, beyond the actual rust, you can just see the thermal, the effect of those Raptors acting on this actual surface down here on the sides, where you actually do have water spraying through there as well too, and even still. It's still just like roasting pretty much everything. So, you do this 10 launches in a row, then the structure is going to start looking different every single time. And potentially you actually end up with like, structural weakness or compromising of the structure itself. Whether that's in the form of welds, breaking the actual welds, cracking your welds, or what is it called? What is the I'm thinking of when you're reversing the temper of the metal because you're like heating it up to a certain temperature and then rapidly cooling it back down. So that like changes the actual material properties of the actual steel itself over time. The more you do that, theoretically, the more you're weakening the actual steel. So yeah, material science has not reached the point where you don't have to give considerations to that kind of stuff. And on this note, one of the reasons that they didn't do that flame trench originally was, they a big part of it was wanting to get underneath here to service the vehicles. And as we see on the Massie's test stand, they've got that mobile platform that moves underneath it. So I think we'll probably see a larger version of that here as well too. Overall, I think this is a great idea, and I think that people shouldn't get too attached to original designs because everything is on the chopping block when it comes to improvements. It's not just the vehicles; it's the manufacturing facility, transport stands, the actual assembly process, sorry, I'm thinking of all the support structures within the actual assembly buildings, all the assembly jigs that they have. Everything is constantly undergoing upgrades and just in general improvements. So I don't think that people should expect anything less of the actual launch mount to expect massive changes from that. Cool. So moving on to, oh, sorry, I'm going to probably go back to those images. Was there anything else at this side of Sanchez that we should probably mention?
They still don't have the what do you want to call them? The supports or drawers on the transport stand there. That they removed all of them from the one stand. Still kind of all laying out. Not sure if they've changed their position at all. They might look like they've been moved around a little bit, but yeah. So not quite sure what they're going to do with that other stand. I suppose it's possible that they may be changing this design already again. They may go to something completely different. We'll have to kind of see. Wouldn't
Yeah.
be unlike SpaceX to, half assemble something and then kind of scrap the idea.
And the crazy thing about that is, like, if you've ever seen one of those transport stands in person, like, they're massive. So it's kind of crazy to imagine something like that just being used a few times and then scrapped. I mean, I don't think any of those transport stands for the boosters ever saw more than 2 boosters. I think maybe like one of those transport stands touched 3 different boosters possibly, but I think most of them only ever touched one, and now they're all scrapped. Um, so I mean, I can't see a reason why that same thing would happen with these, but I don't know. There's probably something else going on here. Another cool thing that I do not have on me, but Chrome Kiwi did a really cool animation of this structure right here, which it appears these go together essentially. So this is a turntable that sits on top of this, and I believe, if I'm pretty positive, this is for the booster aft section. So this is basically their structure for, I feel like, assembling the booster aft section. So obviously you're gonna have multiple stations for booster aft sections where you actually do the assemble the dome and sleeve it, and then somewhere else you're inserting the header tank and then all of the plumbing and all that stuff. So different stations for different tasks, but I think this may be one of the first stations where they're actually integrating the thrust puck, which would probably sit in here, integrating that with the partial dome, and then sleeving it after that. So yeah, pretty cool workstation, and a lot more heavy duty than what we saw for in the past in the fabrication tents. Let's see what else we got here. No more tower sections. That's cool. They've finally stacked the last section of the new integration tower. So now really all we have left out here is the chopstick carriage and each of the arms, which who knows when we'll see those installed. I don't know if they're really in a rush to get that up there, because they'll just really be in the way of things once you get them actually on the tower. So yeah, I think it'll maybe be like a month or so before we see that, but there'll definitely be signs ahead of time that they're about to start moving these. I'm also trying to keep an eye out for other support structures for the launch mount, but I don't think we've really seen much down here. I mean, they are definitely preparing for all the rest of that construction. You see a bunch of cable trays down here, a bunch of smaller pipe fittings that'll probably go inside of the actual tower, and you can see a bunch of other items that they still need to install on the actual tower itself as well too. So really cool that they've just gotten all of this assembly area down here, and it's pretty much already empty. I kind of wonder what the next steps are. Like, what are they going to do with these pads for the tower sections? You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to be needed anymore. So I think we'll see some changes coming soon to Sanchez, which we kind of already are. Anything else down here? Sanchez was kind of quiet this week. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, test tank 16.
That would be booster 14.1. So this is the one that they slap with arms.
I'm just like trying to spit it out quickly and hope I get it right on the first guess. And 2 in a row wrong. Yeah, so booster test tank 14. Is it 14.1 or just 14?
14.1.
Yeah, so this has been this was part of the Chopstick test last week, and then after that test was finished, they moved it here. Oh wow, I just noticed that booster 4 still has engines on the bottom of it. That's hilarious. So yeah, they sent this back to Sanchez for some additional work, and I think this week they actually removed some of the load pins. So it's difficult to see here, but let me see. Vic, I know Vic's posted something, so I'm gonna see if it's actually visible in this or not. Which, yep, it appears it is. So this is from Lab Padre, obviously, and this is one of the load pins that the actual booster will land on top of. So they're sliding it in through the side, and there would be the second one. So they just replaced both of these, which is interesting. I think they were initially damaged, possibly. Let me see. I have some ground images from last week, which I should probably pull up.
Yeah, I believe that those actually, so they attach to the top of the booster forward dome with a pivot point, and I believe that some part in there's a little bit of a crush core that's kind of like the last cushioning that the booster could receive during a landing attempt or really anything. And I believe part of their testing at Massie's had actually compressed that crush core, beyond what it should normally be, which is why we've seen in some of the testing videos, if they lift the arm up and contact that load point, there was a little bit of movement. That realistically, there really shouldn't be any movement, is my understanding. But that was because the crush core had gotten crushed beyond what it was capable of returning to. So, with the removal of those load points and putting them back in, presumably they're either new ones or they replaced some of the components on them. And this could be related to additional testing that they'll do with the arms before. Maybe after Booster 12 comes out and does some testing, not entirely sure, but at the very least, it looks like they're prepping this tank to be able to come back out and do some additional testing.
Yeah, and this is that load point right here, and you can kind of see the little gap up top, which is the area that it has to like kind of flex upwards. And as Ryan's saying, it maybe not actually supposed to do that, but at least there is a little, almost an expansion gap, I guess, that allows it to flex up there.
There's always been a gap that's visible from the outside, but I think there's some stuff on the inside that takes up that gap and essentially is a crush core. So
Right.
from the outside, you'd always see a little bit of a gap there, but that's just basically showing you the limit of how far it can travel before it hits a hard stop.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see here. What else? I'm gonna go back to. Yeah, so I think once they get that replaced, once they do all the stuff that they're doing on the chopsticks, which we'll talk about here shortly, this will probably end up going back out there for a third round of testing. Um, I'm wondering if we'll actually see Booster 12 come out before this happens, because I think they may potentially be doing work inside of Booster 12 right now. We have some indications of that as well too, which we'll talk about. Actually, we might as well talk about it once we get to the rest of the build site, which is coming up here in a few minutes. I guess in the meantime, do we have any other questions about Sanchez? Or I'm guessing there's probably some about the launch mount.
Yeah, your discussion about the launch mount generated a lot of redundant questions, so I'm not going to get to everybody's, but I want to thank DMars for gifting 5 memberships, and as well as Yazada for a $10 super chat. Apologize for two-timing the RGB by watching the NASA announcement back now. And Joel Burnett, 1999 super chat. Love the discussion and speculation on the mobile launch mount. Thanks, RGV. And a €24 donation from Nils Race. I personally think it would be a good idea to destack Tower 1 and demolish OLM 1 so they can give the tower the same base as Tower 2. The base concrete is damaged because of the launching of Starship. What do you think?
Um, I think you have to use the word demolish for both of them. I don't know if you can really truly destack that tower with the way it's constructed, but um, I feel like it would make sense to rebuild the tower, but if anything, that will probably stay, and they'll probably only demolish the launch mount, if I had to guess. It really depends on whether or not they feel like they need to do anything with the foundation of that existing tower to improve it, or if it's the tower that's sinking essentially, or if it's the launch mount, which I'm pretty sure it's probably the launch mount. So um, I feel like that tower will probably end up staying. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I think the amount of time it takes to actually not just stack the tower, but actually assemble all the components from a clean slate is one thing, but to demolish and start over, that's a whole different thing. If SpaceX can make it work with the current tower, I think they're going to keep it. They would adjust other aspects of the area in order to continue using that tower. And with that, I think they will demolish the original launch mount and they will clean slate the entire area, much like 39A is currently. But if they can use that tower again, I think they probably would.
Yeah, I mean that's an expensive structure to try to demolish. I think this would be the first thing on site that actually requires explosives potentially. It'd be a little risky because of the deluge farm there, but given that this thing is filled with concrete, it'll be difficult to take it apart, and it'd be extremely heavy. So, like, if these legs were filled with concrete, I don't think this crane could lift most of these sections. At least anything past this area, there's no way this crane is lifting any of that stuff. Um, Maybe in its base configuration, it could probably handle these with concrete in them, but even then, I'm pretty sure these sections weigh like 400 tons already or something like that, if not more, with all of the cryo tubing and all that stuff in there. So you'd really have to like strip everything out of the structure before you could actually lift the actual main structure, the superstructure off of there. And even then, it would be difficult. You got to cut through both the welds and what did you measure these at, like 4 feet across, Ryan?
I don't remember the exact measurement, but I mean they're not small. It's a lot of mass and concrete and steel. So I agree with your thinking that I think the only way they'd be able to really demolish this is if they were to use controlled explosives to lay it down into the sandy area there. Which even then I have my doubts that it would be able to be done safely. And efficiently. I feel like that these are the kind of structures that you build and you kind of forget about. You don't really take them down, but I'm sure with enough effort they could probably do it. But I have my doubts that they would ever demolish a tower. They would make it work with whatever design they're trying to use.
Yeah. In particular, I think you'd probably end up removing the QD and the chopsticks, and then redoing the mounting points on here if it needs to be different, and potentially change up some of the internal plumbing if it needs to raise up, depending on how the new positioning of the QD arm is. But yeah, the tower itself, the only real difference between this one is the height of the base, which is I think what 2 meters higher on this one. So yeah, other than that, they're essentially the same structure. The foundations are slightly different as far as how they were constructed, but other than that, yeah, I think it kind of makes sense to. Well, actually, there is the one really big thing, which is the fact that the base of this tower is steel, is concrete encased in steel, whereas this is, well, kind of the same thing. It's just nowhere near as strong as this base is. There is still steel plating on the outside of this, but it's not. It's not the kind of 2 layers of steel that they built inside and out for this structure. So Very massive difference in the actual base of them.
Yeah, I mean, they can swap out the arms, they can swap out the QD arm. Realistically speaking, whatever they build at pad B, they could replicate at pad A, but just sink it into the ground, 1.5 meters more, and then you basically end up with the same constraints, in terms of dimensions everywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I want to thanks Charles for a $20 PayPal donation for the plane. Thanks. And thanks for helping keep Mauricio flying. Got a few more questions here. One from Black Eagle. If the new mount is movable, how would the mount be moved anyway, since there's no ramp in the plans included in the PEA, only the flame trench? Because then they would probably need a permanent crane.
At least my suspicion would be
Um,
that the edges of it could extend out over. If you were to pull up a photo of Massie's, Zach might be
One
able to
second.
explain it.
I'm trying to make sure my screen. I'm seeing a few people say the screen's frozen. Um,
I see your mouse
so
moving here.
yeah, well, are you? What? I'm sure you're seeing
Discord.
Sanchez, but on the stream
Yeah.
it's showing the tower. Let's see. Emlyn, can you check that out? Oh, there we go. Cool. All right. So sorry, I didn't hear the question, but if Ryan, you can answer it if you did hear
Yeah,
it.
if you want to pull up a photo of Massey's, maybe explain it a little bit better. But my theory with that is, if it is movable, the stand would essentially extend off the sides by quite a bit. I mean, that's ultimately how it would end up being supported is via, piles along the sides of the trench. But they could essentially roll SPMTs under the edges, lift up and drive it off, and they'd basically be driving straddling the one side of the trench, and so they could just have some studs that would poke out from the side of the platform that the SPMTs would then lift up on, and then that would roll. It's basically the exact same as the ship static fire stand, except instead of the SPMTs being under it, it'd be as if they were on the outsides of it. That would be the
Yeah,
kind of the theory on how they would roll that out of the way.
I think the other option would be to have the drive over trench going in a different direction. So instead of since you have a two-sided trench, your drive up could be coming up from the side instead of from this direction, right? So, um, I mean, because if those SPNTs have to straddle the stand, then they may not fit on the road.
Well, they might not need to straddle it to at least move it to the launch site. They could definitely go into the middle of it, but in terms of moving it around at the launch site, they could
Oh,
potentially be on the
yeah,
outside.
that makes sense.
Either way, I think there's a way that they'd be able to do it with SPMTs. They wouldn't need a crane to actually lift the platform every time they wanted to swap it out.
Definitely not.
All right. Question from Ian McKeeboy. Do you think SpaceX will build a retracting swing arm for the booster like the ship and then not need all the shielding?
They're definitely going to need the shielding one way or another.
I don't think the arm would move quick enough, given how quickly the booster lifts off. I mean, the ship QD arm is, so far off the ground, and it still has trouble getting out of the way in time of the plume. If they were to have something retract, they'd have to disconnect it considerably before ignition, which is not going to happen. So I don't think that would actually provide any benefit.
For sure. Agreed. And that brings me to the next question from Black Eagle. Didn't Elon mention that they will water cool the launch deck in Tim's Starbase tour?
No, he in the second tour he said that they may need to do that in the future, but in this most recent one, I don't think he actually said anything about that. Do you remember anything about that, Ryan?
I don't remember in the recent one if he had mentioned anything about water, but I think it's been assumed for a while that they do want to move in that direction, given
Yeah.
past comments.
All right. And final question regarding Sanchez. Ship 25 asks, any sign of the new QD arm?
No. That is another thing that's been taking quite a while to show up. I'm surprised it's not here yet. At least the main pipes that they're going to need to actually build the structure. So I was looking around here earlier to try and see if there was anything there. I kind of got distracted by these, thinking that they could be related to that because it is built using essentially long pipe sections of pipe. But I don't think this is related to that. So, um, yeah, still waiting on it to show up. You know what? This actually very well could be part of it.
I was gonna say that might be uh, parts they could use to construct it. Um, the offset, is kind of interesting. It kind of mimics the angle of the current arm on the underside if they were to stack those vertically as like little offsets to then build on top of.
I mean, this could be the vertical part of the arm, right? Let me grab a ground shot. Where is my ground shots? Here we go. So many pictures. Let's see if I have one that shows the backside of the tower. I don't think I do. Maybe one of the faraway ones will show it. I could always pull up one from. Actually, I'll just use an aerial one.
I think those tubes are a little bit too long to be vertical parts to the arm. I think we're kind of expecting the arm to be slanted a little bit more.
Yeah, I was thinking like, wow, you can't really see it much here. Like down in here, this vertical arm.
Yeah, that one, there'd be stuff on it for like a hinge and whatnot. So I don't think it's one of those.
Right. But yeah, you can see the pipes that they use to construct this. So it's very well possible that those could be the first sections of it. But I think these ones, when they originally showed up, they had like all of the joints already welded. Actually, no, they did all of these. They did this pipe by pipe. Actually, they showed up pre-cut, and then they assembled and welded all of this one pipe at a time, which is actually kind of crazy now that I think about it. So yeah, it's possible that we could see something similar happen, and these may be the start of it.
I know when it came to the arm, several of the planes of the truss came in as pieces that were somewhat pre-assembled, and then they just threw in tubes to maybe make like the cross connections. But it came in; there were rather large pieces that came in, and then they built up from there and added additional tubing to it. So we would probably expect to see some stuff come in with some of those cross pieces already, or the joints would already be welded together, and then they would
Right.
just add the tubes between. So I don't think these pieces are for that unless they're going to be doing a lot more work than what they did on the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Crane asks, related to this just now, are those two black parts near the black pipes hinges for the QD arm?
Yeah. I
If you
guess we don't know.
zoom in, yeah, zoom
Oh,
in there to the top, I think maybe the top right.
are you talking about these right here?
Yeah.
I believe so.
So
They don't look like it.
interesting shape, but
I don't know if I have a better image looking right down on them. Let me see. That's definitely not going to work.
yeah, we need a little better lighting, I think, to be able to see since it's painted black.
I mean, this one does kind of look like a hinge a little bit, but yeah, really tough to tell. Um, yeah, and I don't know if we're going to be able to answer that one.
All right. Dave Watkins and a couple other folks in chat are saying the screen was frozen, but not now. Back. Okay. 55 Chevy guy Steve, thanks for the $20 super chat, saying they added bigger dampeners to the full length of the tower A chopsticks. How will they provide sufficient dampening on the shorter chopsticks?
Um, that's a good question. So on the shorter chopsticks, they um, only have, I think, five mounting points. Um, so I mean, with these, it may be easier to just have one piston in the center. Okay, let's do a little test here and see if y'all can hear me. I think it's for some reason showing. I don't know if this is the intro that's locked on screen right now. Okay, I do see. All right. Hopefully, y'all can hear me in the chat. Nice. Well, not our day for technical issues, but these things happen. Sorry, everybody. Thanks for holding on while we got that lined out. I did say something about the actuators and the chopsticks. I'm not sure if that went through, but essentially, I guess I'll just repeat it shortly. They haven't really figured out what they're doing on the current set of chopsticks as far as actuators versus dampeners. So I think it's difficult to try and guess what they're doing with these two until they figure out what they're doing with the current set. So yeah, with that, Astro Joe, do we have any other questions, or can I move on to the build site?
You may move on, sir.
Awesome. Cool. Well, here we are at the build site, where things, to some degree, look largely the same, but there's some nice updates out here. So ship 32?
31.
31. Wow. Ship 31 is still in the high bay, and that's getting some tile work done on the tip. Ryan, do you know if they've done anything else other than that?
Not really. No, they've taken a couple tiles off at various places, and I think ultimately we'll probably see them take a lot more tiles off. But they may be waiting until after the next flight to see how their upgrades worked on ship 30. But so far it seems like they're doing the tiles that they kind of expected to do anyway, which would be like around the nose tip specifically.
Yeah, that would really suck to like strip the whole thing and then realize that, you know, the new design does not work, and then have to just redo everything for a third time. I think I would probably just scrap the ship at that point. But yeah, so not a ton of progress with 31, but we did have some progress with 33 this week, which is awesome. And I got a little time lapse here that I posted last night, so I'll go ahead and show that. That's one from. So this is ship 33 being stacked. This was really cool, actually, because here, I'm going to back it up. Why did I make this so fast? I'm going to actually slow this down a little bit. Do half speed on here. So yeah, we can actually were able to see them as they lifted it with the bridge crane and got it in position over the aft section. And so I'll pause it right here. So this is the new header tank design for the V2 ships. So this is actually 3 methane pipes for the RVACs, and then I guess all of the center engines pull from the main downcomer. And maybe I have. I don't want to ruin that one. I'm just gonna go and pull this up really quick because it's worth showing this. Hopefully it's not too far back because I haven't really posted a ton this week, or have I? Okay, cool. So yeah, this is the downcomer assembly jig, or is that the right word? Yeah, assembly jig, I guess. So this is basically the jig that they use. You can see it has a little walkway up top, and then there's a pipe in the center with a frame up here, which allows them to basically attach the pipes to that whole assembly and lift all of this up there at the same time. And then there's another one at the bottom that kind of does the same thing. And Ryan, you were saying that this should allow them to do an additional 3 engines if they wanted to.
I don't think it's actually built that way right now. The frame looks like it's mainly geared toward only having the 3, but potentially they could change that top area to have 3 more if they were to move on to 6 RVACs, in the near future. But so far, it seems like a lot of the infrastructure they're currently developing is really only geared toward having 3 RVAC engines. So I think we're still a little ways out from seeing ships that have more than 3 of the RVAC engines.
Right. Yeah, so I guess, and I could be wrong with the way that they use this, but I believe they probably have to end up lifting the ship off of the turntable and then placing this inside and then lowering it back on top. Is that your kind of understanding of how that works? I don't know. I
Yeah.
think they closed the door when they did this.
Yeah, we saw this moved in, and then I think they closed the door, so we didn't really see much, I guess, happen after the fact. But we know that this got put in that front right corner, and then presumably they lower the ship down on top of it, and then this assembly jig allows them to attach these pipes within the ship, with it kind of over the top of the stand, and then they lift the entire assembly, up with these pipes kind of hanging in place. And one thing to kind of note here is that the pipes appear to be vertical in this image, And later on in the time lapse, we actually see that they're at an angle. So there is some amounts of pivoting that needs to be done in order to get these attached to the dome on the methane tank. And then there's likely some kind of bracing that holds these pipes in the tank at an angle like this. So these would be angled so that they kind of interface perfectly with the ports on the bottom of the aft section when they were to lower these together.
Right. Yeah, and this is basically the first time that we saw the front of this ship um, since it was started being stacked. And y'all can see that they have some uh, rods that come down. I'm going to actually go back to that. So these come down and basically have load cells with, I'm going to call these turnbuckles. What are these called?
Is it a shackle or?
Yeah, some shackles on the both sides with a load cell in the center, which kind of allows them to determine, I guess, center of mass on this thing when they're lifting it. So, yeah, these get attached down below, and the camera actually scrolls up a little bit. We're going to come back to that thought because there's something else up here that we got to discuss. I guess we didn't zoom in on it that long. Yeah, so it basically attaches down here at the bottom. Um, and I'm going to speed that back up. Frame rate was killing me right there. Yeah, once this thing is fully attached, then they lift the entire structure together. I think I may have to. And then once they drop it onto the turntable, then they lower the actual, I think they remove those shackles and then lower the ship on top of it after they get the actual tank section onto the turntable. So this is really cool, actually being able to see that process. You know, I'm not gonna lie, I've kind of hated on the Megabay 2 in the past because I wish this was for boosters, because I would much rather personally see this process on the boosters. But one of the things that we did see here was some interesting new stringers on the nose cone of the ship up there, and this is a better close up right here that shows the stringers. And so when I initially posted this last night, I think a lot of people were really hoping that this isn't related to like a new design. And you can see Jack Byers' little GIF over here, Frankenstein. A lot of people thought this was like a design that was kind of transferring over potentially from ship 26 and ship 26. But I don't think that is the case. So thankfully somebody posted this in my Discord server yesterday. So this was ship 33's nose cone section after it came out of the high bay on July 24th. So you can see it had like some pretty massive dents in it. And so I think these are basically to flatten those back out. So unlike the tank sections, which can just be pressurized to get out dents like that, I think this actually required some extra reinforcement. But yeah, I don't think we should expect to necessarily see these on future ships. But they're probably definitely gonna have to do something to prevent whatever caused that to happen in the first place. But on that note, I did mention that we were not certain whether or not this vehicle would actually fly. And I guess, Ryan, what are your thoughts on the whole first of the V2 ships thing?
Yeah, maybe before that, if you want to go back to that image close-up of the stringers, I wanted to point out something. So one thing that people have kind of pointed out is that if you look just down below those external stringers, you notice there's not really any weld marks on the payload barrel section, indicating that there's not really any stringers above the door in this location. And that may have something to do with why the welding wasn't very pretty in this area. It could be due to some of the warping over time without having the rigidity added by the stringers. There may have been excessive warping that they weren't really contending with, and that may be why we're seeing these stringers added here, is to try and make that area as strong as possible, since now that's got a lot of warping and Keeping in mind, technically the dents look a little worse when you're looking at it from further away because of the focal length of the camera. But it's definitely, dented in that, particular area. So I feel like it might have something to do with the welding process and not having stringers on the inside of the nose cone there.
Yeah. And, this is the foundation series, if you will, of version 3 or version 2. So I think they're kind of basically having to get their assembly process down with that. While it is largely the same as the V1 ships, there's also some differences as well. So they're kind of getting a new manufacturing process going right now, especially using this new four-pointed lifter as well. So everything they're doing right now is essentially new. Um, so I would imagine that there's a possibility that they may not end up flying this ship just based on the fact that it's kind of a um, prototype of the V2s, essentially.
So even before we saw these external stringers, I had kind of convinced myself that there was a likelihood that this ship is not flown, just from the standpoint that it is the first. Now I know there's a lot of opinions regarding whether it's going to fly or whether it's not going to fly. I think they definitely are going to build it with the intent to fly it, but there is the possibility that something comes along that would prevent them from actually completing that task. So we've seen them basically almost fully complete vehicles and then not use them before. So it's not out of the question that they could completely assemble this, take it to Massie's and do a cryo test and then not fly it. But they also might fly it. So maybe just to level expectations that this one might not fly, but I certainly would like to see it fly. But there are a lot of differences in this design, which in some degree have not been proven out, or actually structurally tested. So we'll need to see what they end up doing with this vehicle. But I don't want people to be shocked if for some reason it ends up being like ship 32, where it gets parked outside for a while and it doesn't actually fly. So
Or ship 24. Yeah. And sorry, I'm having to constantly check back to the chat just to make sure that my audio is still going. So
I think what I had said last night was that it, could potentially be a ship 20 situation. But ship
I
20
say
was a
ship
little.
24.
You did, yes.
Wow. I am not on my game today. um, yeah.
You want
So
to talk about the engine platform there and so we see now, that's actually a good image. We can see that they've installed the platforms here on this stand. So I believe that means that I think all 3 of the engine installation stands have the platforms in a configuration that they could use any of the stands to actually install engines on vehicles now.
yeah, I think the main thing holding them up from moving 31 out of the high bay is just the fact that they're still inside doing additional work. I mean, you can see that these platforms that go all the way around. Um, yeah, a ton of the actual floor space in some ways has been taken up, but I guess you probably wouldn't get that close to the walls anyways with the work stands. But really cool the way they've outfitted the inside of this building. Let's see. We can also see booster 15 in here. So this one is being stacked currently, and I'm trying to decide if I want to mention. Yeah, might as well. So a few weeks ago, Booster 15's aft section moved in here, and it had a bunch of new tanks mounted onto it, onto the side of the landing tank. And this week, we did see a bunch of those similarly sized tanks going into the Mega Bay. And so there was actually, I think, 10 of them. And I was going to mention this in my episode, but I think it's worth talking about now. There was 10 of those tanks that went in here. The ones that were on Booster 15's aft section, I think there was probably 7 of them on there that were actually visible. So, and matter of fact, you know what? I'm just gonna stop being lazy and actually find this so we can, for those of you who haven't seen it, are able to know what we're talking about here. And again, hopefully it's not too far down. Oh man, completely forgot about the chopsticks that we're going to talk about earlier. It's actually a good thing I'm scrolling down here to find this. And hopefully I haven't passed it yet. Sorry for the delay, y'all. But yeah, so this new aft section has all these tanks on the side of it. Oh, there we go. So there's 3 on this side, 3 on this side, and then there's another pipe back there. So it looks like there's potentially at least 7, if not 9 or more. So what we actually saw going into the Mega Bay 2 was 10 of those tanks. And so we know that Booster 15 already has those. A point that I've kind of made about this is that Booster 15 is not a version 2 booster. So in my opinion, anything that you see on Booster 15 is likely on every booster before it. It just happens to be the first one that came out with that stuff pre-installed. So basically, from what we can gather, this probably has something to do with expanding the capacity of the landing tank. So that's actually very interesting for a lot of reasons, actually. Number one, it's interesting if this is the case that they didn't just increase the size of the actual landing tank itself. That maybe seems to be something that they are not wanting to do, which it seems like an easy thing to do to me, to just make the tank a little bit taller. But yeah, either way, it looks like they're trying to expand the capacity. What we've seen on these tanks, thanks to them rolling them out a few days ago, is that there's actually a pipe, 90-degree pipe coming off the end of it to go into the actual landing tank. So there's 10 of these going into the landing tank. And they just so happen, it doesn't look like it from this angle, but they just so happen to also fit through these access hatches. So I think this is like 24 inches, right, Ryan?
Yeah, I think it's roughly 24 inches, maybe 25, somewhere in there. But yeah, from higher resolution images, it seems as though these are just small enough to fit through that hatch, which is quite interesting. Maybe lends some credit to the idea that they might actually be able to shoehorn several of these inside of an already built booster.
Yeah. And I think, in my opinion, this probably happened potentially already to Booster 11 before it flew. And it's probably in the process of happening on Booster 12 currently, or they're doing it on 13 or 14. But either way, I think this process has already possibly been done on 12. But if not, if those tanks were for the booster that they're about to fly next, then they're probably still in the process of getting all this stuff attached. And therefore, I don't think Booster 12 is currently ready to fly.
I think 12 already has them. It seemed like there was a pretty big lull where 12 was kind of just sitting in there. And I have a feeling 12 already has them, and the ones that we saw moved in are maybe for 13 or 14.
Okay. Yeah, obviously, there's not going to be any way for us to know. There's zero way for us to know that they put them in 11. We won't know for sure if they're in 12, but we know that either 12, 13, or 14 has them now. So it's safe, I think, to assume that they all do, or they all will. But a very interesting change that we've seen on these versions of the booster. And the interesting thing about it is it now makes me question whether or not Booster 10 ran out of fuel on its landing attempt. I know that when Elon mentioned during his tour with Tim that there was like low pressure for startup, which was a really confusing statement, honestly, because Tim was actually talking about boost back, but the low pressure that Elon mentioned had to have been the landing burn that he was talking about, because all of the engines did start up for boost back. So if there was a pressure related issue on the landing burn, just really confusing because of the way that we know that that tank is pressured with COPVs instead of the autogenous pressurization system. So I'm starting to think that it ran out of fuel, but that also doesn't make sense because it kind of failed like pretty much immediately during the
Yeah,
landing,
I
right?
don't think that that was an issue on 10. I think 10 and 11 probably were as we expect, and 12 is the first one to have these new tanks because I think these tanks are specifically so that they can burn the final three engines a lot longer, and given all the mass that the boosters have taken on, it probably makes sense why they would need to do that. So I think 12 is the first one that'll probably feature these tanks, and specifically was a little bit of a rushed job just so they can do the catch with 12.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if we can tell a difference with those landing burns, even though the flight profile is going to be completely different. Maybe we'll be able to tell a difference with that kind of explains this. So right now it's kind of in the speculation zone, and I guess it still will be after Flight 5. But there's always the possibility that the SpaceX announcers will mention something about it.
Also have some good fins there laying on the ground, and as well as the chine pieces. I think that pile is slowly starting to decrease. So they are putting chine covers on at least one of the boosters right now.
14 already had them, but maybe, I mean, it only makes sense to be either 14 since 15 is not fully stacked yet. Oh, wait. 15 could be fully stacked, right? No? Well, I guess not, because this is still here.
I don't think they have enough places to, because they've got, what, 12, 13, and 14 in there. They only have 3 stands in the back, so they may be bottlenecked.
They could leave it on the turntable, right?
Yeah, but then we wouldn't probably see. They're on the right. I'm pretty sure that's 15, so it's at least in 2 pieces still.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I don't even know if they can put the aft section on the turntable like that. Cool. Anyways, so I guess let's check if we have any questions from the build site really quick, and then I'll move us over to Starfactory.
Sure. First, I want to thank Crane Man for a $50 PayPal donation, $50 for gas for the next flight. Go RGV team, Crane Man. Thank you very much, Crane Man. Appreciate you keeping RGV flying. Question from our very own Stephanie B, whose birthday it is now in Australia. So happy birthday, Stephanie B. And the question is, could the extra tanks on booster be so they can land with the hot stage ring on the booster?
Yes and no. It could be.
I'm not sure why they would have jettisoned it on the last flight if they were wanting to try and land with the hot stage ring. Yes, it does get rid of mass, and if they add more propellant, then maybe they are able to make up some of that margin again. But I think we expect them to jettison the hot stage ring again, because I think we already saw the pistons extended on booster 12 during the static fire. So I think they plan to jettison it again, given the fact that the hardware is there. So I don't think it has anything to do with the hot stage ring or trying to land with it.
Yeah, I have a feeling they're not really planning to recover the hot stage ring anytime soon.
All right. And a question from the very beginning of the show I've been sitting on for a while from Booster 13. When do we think Ship 33 will have its aft flaps installed?
Good question. I don't know if these are the aft flaps right here for 33. I'm assuming they are. But yeah, I guess we got to give them a few days. They just got the aft section fully stacked. So, I mean, once they have that welded, I suppose it could be one of the next steps that comes up. But they may also wait until they have it on one of the engine install stands instead of the turntable. So, yeah.
I think it's possible that they might wait to install those until after it goes through cryo testing, just because they know that specific flap design works and they're not changing the aft flaps. And the only reason why it has the forward flaps is because it's part of the new, build construction process they want to, get data on. So it's possible that it goes out to Massey's and crowd tests and doesn't have those flaps on yet. But then again, they may, want a fully operational vehicle that they can test every single component at Massey's. So they may also take their time and actually put the flaps on it before moving out. So I think either scenario is pretty likely. They seem to be making pretty quick progress with this first V2 ship. So they may try and fast track it and just get it crowd tested to get data on that before putting the aft flap on.
Right.
All right. My cue is clear.
Cool. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move over to the Starfactory, which we're mainly focused this week on the changes down to the office side of the structure, but they are kind of clearing away the actual construction area now. So they've gotten the part of their driveway installed or poured over here recently. Do I have a picture from that side? Kind of. Yeah, so this is kind of allows them to turn in a little bit easier with those SPMTs when they're transporting things back and forth to the launch site. And then we can see that the weird looking sidewalk is the second part of that's been poured. That's really weird. I don't even know if that is a sidewalk or if it's just a ramp that goes up to the sidewalk. No, that's probably flat. But yeah, just overall more concrete work on this side. Nothing too exciting. Is that a... Okay, the sidewalk's going down here as well too now. And that may have been done last week, I'm not sure. But yeah, so this side of the structure is making some progress. They now have joined the extension onto the office side of the building. I can probably show that a little better from another angle. Always looking for better angles. This is a good one. Yeah, so we can see that it's actually physically attached now, which is cool. So basically, it's just going to continue the curve of the building all the way down to the end of this office structure. And I'm assuming the glass will probably go straight across as well too.
You look at the beams, you can actually kind of see where they've got some of the white are kind of close together, and they seem to match up with the kind of the facade for the glass on the current office building. So probably gonna connect those, extend those together, and then that kind of indicates where the glass might actually go to, especially that kind of second layer. You can see how that beam, if you look over to the left, how there's kind of the double beams that are close together horizontally, and then they stop there, kind of that second column over. So potentially from here, that this is basically where the glass will continue to from the office building, and then they'll go with the lower section over to meet the factory.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, I was looking at these little spots right here. They look similar to these ones, but maybe that's for something else.
I think they're putting that sheet metal in there, so they're possibly putting concrete, flooring up there too.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think they'll end up doing that up in the middle level as well. Have you have any updated thoughts on this? Because it's even seeing it now is weird because it's like weird that they have to walk around these diagonal beams if you're walking on this platform.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Some people have suggested they're going to remove the diagonal beams, but I don't think that's actually going to happen because it would kind of go against the structure here. But I think they're probably going to have some concrete floors, and then they may actually have walls, I guess, toward the outside. And then where the beam is higher off of the floor, they may actually have more of a walkway. So at least in the inner part, it might be like a balcony that overlooks into the factory or whatever is actually going to be in that area. But at least on the far outside is where there might be walls that are actually encased in those horizontal or diagonal beams.
Right. Yeah, and they're already starting to put the panels up for the roofing section as well too. When we look at it from the other side, you can see that they've started the actual extension in this direction as well too. So this is a little bit different. No walkway on this side. It's more like the traditional factory with you have your bridge crane that will come all the way down. So I'm assuming that eventually when they join these structures and remove the wall, that this bridge crane will actually be able to go the full length of the floor, and they'll probably have, I don't know, 3 or 4 of them in there, at least 2, if not more, but possibly 3 or 4. So yeah, the bridge crane basically comes all the way down to here. I don't see where this kind of looks like it's stopping here. I don't see another place for this to join over to this building.
Yeah, I feel like we'll end up with a wall here that's probably going to be glass, whether it's right there or maybe a little bit further over. I feel like there might end up being a wall here that'll separate the mezzanine area from the actual factory. Very similar to what they have at Hawthorne, where you've got kind of office space, and then you can kind of look through the glass and you can see all of the Falcon 9 stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's spots for columns here, though, right?
I
Across
think
the back.
they put some columns in that area. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
I
you
can
can see
see
footings there to the left. So
and one right there in the back, all along the back as well too. It's just weird that they're not here.
I guess there might actually be one right there.
This right here. I was
Yeah,
kind of looking at that,
it
but
looks similar to the other stuff that they had, but
I mean, you would think that they would have already put those, continue that. Or maybe it's, I mean, obviously they're still in the process of it, so maybe we'll still see that added on there. Yeah, but this is really cool, and as y'all can tell, they've also got some of the interior wall panels up as well too. So these are basically for, I mean, they look like they're for the rooms that are inside there, but it's tough to tell where the actual walls are at this point, because there's usually another set of walls behind this. So it almost looks like a hallway, like an outer hallway and an inner hallway, but that would be really weird. Yeah, kind of tough to tell what's going on there.
to me, it almost seems like it's temporary. Like what you might find at like a shopping mall when they're working on a specific store, they kind of board up the outside of it. I wonder if it seems pretty wasteful, but I wonder if they're kind of temporarily blocking off the actual office building from the rest of this because they want to finish the inside without, I guess, dealing with the elements potentially. And they may go back and remove a bunch of that because given where those walls are, that doesn't really leave a lot of room for like a balcony if that is a permanent wall.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
I'm wondering if some of this is temporary that they will end up removing.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, I mean, this is a really awesome structure, and the only footings that they haven't done yet are kind of in this general area. So I'm sure we'll see that next. And down here, they were pouring a pad out here, which is a weird little extension. Just the order that they do some of this stuff is interesting sometimes. And I guess the only real other thing to mention down here is some people like seeing rings outside, which we never see lately. But they do have some random ring sections laying outside over here, which is, I feel like usually means they're scrapped. But yeah, I don't know. Kind of weird to see some singles out here. Are these
Maybe,
dome?
no, that's I think a reflection because the curve
Okay.
it's shining the sun. If you want to go to the first picture, bottom left, Zach, it might be a good angle to show. Um, not fully, but up where the new extension is going to meet with the office building, you can kind of see how they've got some beams that they've put a little bit further up top to the right there in the right corner. On the extension here, they've got the beams that are kind of coming down at an angle, which are likely going to, as they come down that that section, those beams are going to gradually probably flatten out so they can actually meet with the flat roof of the office building.
Wait, are you talking about?
Top right, the white beams
Yeah.
right there. Yep, those. So you can see how they're like twisting as they go from a sloped roof to a flat roof.
Oh, yeah, I can kind of see that.
There's a couple other angles that make it a lot more obvious, but yeah, they're twisting the roof to go from the slope of the factory to the flat roof of the office building. I think that one's a little more obvious.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's cool being able to see through the structure for now. But yeah, they got a ton of glass up on the other side of it. So that's starting to look really good. I think they're essentially got one level to go, and I think they also started this level already, possibly this morning, I think. But yeah, this looks really awesome.
They started on the far right side. You can see they're kind of painting the white and then the glass right above your cursor there on that side. Yeah, that little side. So I believe they're kind of working their way from this side around toward the factory. So they'll paint the structure here, and then they'll put the glass on after that.
Yeah, they're super fast with all of this. Cool. So do we have any questions about the Starfactory, or shall we move to the launch site?
We shall move on.
Do you want to maybe
Cool.
point out the chillers behind the factory at all for the liquid system? Yeah, so I believe these were installed this week, or at least brought in. We're not entirely sure if they're in their final position, but this is the actual heat exchangers that they'll be using for the liquid system to, I believe it's to cool the office building area.
Like a chilled water system?
Yeah, I believe that's what we have determined it to be.
That makes sense. Yeah, instead of putting it on the actual structure itself, just have it off to the side. It's kind of far away, but actually we can see it better right here. Bit far away, but we do know that they have gone underground and ran pipes from here, from this building over to there. So cool. Yeah, well, I will go ahead and swap us over to the launch site because we are approaching the end of where we were hoping to end the show today. But obviously we're probably going to end up going over that. Let's see. Let's start with Pad A stuff first. Oh, never mind. We'll start with Pad B. So, yeah, we have a fully stacked tower now. The actual image that I was showing earlier is really cool because you can see both of them together from this angle is just really awesome. You know, I was actually showed this image to my mom yesterday, and she was like, "Wait, where did this other tower come from?" Because I think anybody who watched the last launches and isn't, you know, a daily follower like most of us are, will kind of be blown away to see an entirely new tower constructed in the time since that last launch. So 41 days total is what it was to get this thing stacked. So that's extremely impressive. I think because of that, it kind of makes people ask the question on whether or not this will possibly be used for the catch attempt on Flight 5. And I think the answer to that is a resounding no. They still have a ton of work left to do on this. Even though it's stacked, there's like a lot left to do. So I think they've reached level 5 or something like that with the welding of the columns. So you can actually even see it from this high up. The weld marks going around the side over here, and this guy actively working on the 6th level right here. So they have a little bit more to go, and I think they've started on concrete for the columns. I'm not. This pipe is currently disconnected, so we do know that they've poured, not necessarily the lower level, but the actual footings for the columns. But I don't think they've actually done the first level yet. So we should see that soon, though. I'm sure that'll be a few days where we'll see lines of concrete trucks coming in here to offload for these columns. But yeah, crazy amount of progress on this. They are currently so one thing that they did was not include a lot of the internal bracings for the actual roof section. So I think part of that potentially had something to do with I wanted to say with the elevator, but I don't think the elevator does it go through here? Can't tell if there's I think it does. So I think part of the reason for this was number one, keeping the weight below a certain level, and then also the fact that they still have to lower other things into here later. So I think they were holding off a little bit on installing the rest of those beams until it was actually in place for both of those reasons. But we have seen them start to lift some of those beams up this morning, or maybe that was last night. I can't remember. But yeah, it's tons of good progress, and still, like I said, lots of work for this crane to do, because it's really the only thing I can reach this high. So anything that they want to get installed up there, now they're going to have to do it while the crane's here. But yeah.
I think the biggest difference with Section 9 is they've made it a lot nicer up top for the workers as they're moving around. There's more railings and stuff up there compared to the first tower.
Yeah, they got handrails on. I mean, this would be really cool to walk up there. Yeah, and at the base of the tower, they're starting to run a trench that goes basically from this box down here over to the base of the tower. I'm going to look at it from this side, actually. So there's a bunch of boxes right here with for electrical conduit. And I don't know. This kind of looks like that's what it's running to. I know there's I think they ran conduit underground up to like this point right here, but they may have not gone past that yet. So I think they're just joining that here, which makes this a large electrical vault almost. There may be something else on top of it, but in my opinion, this is just a massive electrical vault. And now that I think about it, this is actually kind of similarly constructed to the one that they built at Sanchez.
Recording frozen screen again.
What? Frozen?
Yep.
Now, can they still hear me though? That's the real question. I don't think we're frozen. Maybe we are. Yeah, I think it is frozen. Stuck on my desktop. Luckily, I got a cool one for today.
Yeah, it's stuck on the X screen, but they can hear us.
It says yeah, it looks like they can hear us. See, the thing about these issues is that it's difficult to tell whether it's us or if it's YouTube. But yeah, thanks for bearing with us either way. But yeah, so this building right here, I believe, has a basement underground, if I remember that correctly. And so this is like a concrete hardened structure. So I think that's kind of similar to what's going on with this one, an electrical bunker, essentially. So yeah, beyond that, I guess the next big thing going on down here is the actual flame trench. So Ryan, what are your thoughts on the current stage of this? Oh, okay. No worries. The flame trench, like I was saying, is making some good progress. What? Oh, I thought you said Ryan had to come back. You're talking to me. Cool. All right. Yeah. Once again, sorry for the technical difficulties today. Appreciate all of you bearing with us. And try not to give us a dislike button because I don't think it's our fault. It's just one of those random glitches that are happening. So and I'm watching this on the side as well too, so making sure that it's good on my side, and it looks like it's fine. So cool. Yeah. So we have the outline here for the flame trench, and Ryan, did you want to start this one off?
Sure. Yeah. So I think we can see a lot more of the sheet piling now. So we have a decent idea of where they're actually going to excavate for this trench, and I think the theories regarding a three-sided trench can probably be put to bed now, since it looks very much as though they're going to be essentially excavating a line and not like a T shape. So kind of back to potentially being a two-sided flame trench. I uh, I think it's likely going to be two-sided, just from the standpoint of how far the piles are originating. Or if you were to basically put a center point in the middle of this shape, it's basically where the launch mount would be. So it seems fairly likely that they're going to be exhausting in two directions, and whatever that means for a diverter is remain to be seen. But I think it's highly likely that we see a two-sided trench here. So, the piles, they still don't really have those exposed yet. We have a decent idea of kind of the grid layout that they've got kind of under the dirt, based on some of the patterning and some of the past photos. But there's a lot of piles going on underneath this structure, so they certainly don't want this thing moving around. But yeah, I think they're progressing here. I don't know exactly what they're doing with this, the current machinery here. I've heard a
It's
couple of
a
different
jet
terms.
grouter.
Yeah, the jet grouting is like one of the terms I've heard. So, um, not really sure what that is used for, but maybe you know a little bit more about that, Zach.
I don't, but I'm gonna guess that because there's all of these pilings that are down here, they can't do deep soil mixing like they did at the Massie site, and so this water jet grouting probably allows them to work around um, all of the pilings in the ground, possibly without using like an auger or something. So yeah, I think that's what they're doing. They bring a lot of water trucks in here. I thought there was one down here, but yeah, a lot of water trucks mixing with probably a bentonite slurry, if I had to guess. Um, so they're just doing that at an unknown depth. It would be difficult to really tell um, what exactly they're doing until they start excavating stuff, and that kind of gives us a little bit better clues on everything else that was done here. But I think we're getting close to that, and I don't know. Uh, the excavation is going to be interesting. Um, so there will be some offset between where these pilings are and where the actual wall goes. Um, so that'll be interesting to see where the actual flame trench walls and how they construct those walls as well. Because there's a lot of different ways that they could do that. They could um, do those walls similar to how they did at Massey's, um, diaphragm walls, and do that before they ever even excavate any of this stuff. But I have a feeling the excavation may come first, and then basically doing a huge pile cap down here that um, basically fuses in with the actual wall as well too. So
I have a feeling that we're going to see essentially steel walls and not exposed concrete, given what happened to the original or Tower A's base with all the heat and all the spalling. I have a feeling we're going to see probably a very similar design to Tower B's base, where it's essentially a steel structure that they then fill with concrete. Or it's possible they even do something more water cooling related, where they just inject water from the sidewalls into the middle. It's one thought I've kind of been floating as well. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what they actually do here. But given the construction type, I'm kind of leaning toward it not being concrete, or at least exposed concrete.
yeah,
Which, speaking of concrete, I did just notice that they have flooring in the base, or the lean-to of Tower B. So they're going to be putting concrete up there. So it looks like, instead of that being a steel beam structure with kind of plates on top, they're going to put concrete in there. Looks like they left a gap for stairs too.
Yeah, we'll probably see once that's completed, we may see that drawworks finally arrive soon. Cool. So I'm going to, I guess, move us on from the Pad B area. I'm sorry, I'm kind of speeding through things at this point, but do have some other things to do today. But did also want to mention this driveway. No real progress with that yet. It's kind of still at the same point as where it was last week. Um, but moving on to the, okay, wrong direction. Uh, Tank farm area. Also, not a ton to talk about down here. They still are waiting for an additional tank to show up. Um, and I don't think they've even completed the actual footings for that yet either, but they do have some of the pilings drilled, I think. But the drilling rig that's currently at the Sanchez site, I am pretty positive is going to be coming back to the launch site once it finishes over there. So as far as the tank farm goes, not a ton to talk about. I think there was some interesting steel frames that they're installing down here. This may be a long steel beam right here, which has kind of been lifted in place somewhere in here. I don't know where it's at currently, but I do remember seeing that. They also have some kind of like almost scaffolding going up around the area where all of the old pipes for the vertical tanks were. So something's going on down here. We just don't know what it is yet. But yeah, I'm going to move us past the tank farm because, like I said, not much to talk about there. And we will discuss the chopsticks. We don't really have ground images this week, but we do. We can probably go through this verbally. Actually, before the chopsticks, so I mentioned last week how they installed additional gusset plates on the side of the tower. They were longer plates that for the diagonal and horizontal beams right here. And so I think they may have already started, and I could be wrong, removing the cladding from this side of the tower so that they can install those new gusset plates on that side as well too. And if we look down here, you can see that there's several pairs of those gusset plates laying on the ground. So these are definitely going to be installed soon. And yeah, they're basically reinforcing the tower, reinforcing the chopsticks, and that, in my opinion, is one of the craziest news items of the week. And I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. I thought I had it up earlier, but I don't. But it should be up here pretty quickly. So yeah, they did I have a full shot showing all of the arms? I don't think I do. Well, I can at least show it with this one image. So, oh, here we go. Yeah, so basically what they did here is shave off the paint on every single one of the seams for where the pipe sections are joined together to create these long sections. So they shaved off pretty much all of them on the actual vertical parts of these arms, and I think they've even started to move up into these areas up here. You can kind of see another seam right here that's hasn't had the paint removed yet. So they removed all the paint in these areas, and then they went and installed essentially weld doublers over these, so you can see how large these things are. So these go all the way around. I believe there was, I think I counted 20 of them per. Sorry, I actually have the number right here in the actual tweet. So 12 plates on each seam. And I originally quoted this as 32 zones where they were doing this, but it's actually a lot more than that. So they're, tack welding these on, and then I believe they may be done with that as far as the ones that they've attached, or they will come back and actually fully weld all the way around the perimeter. But essentially what they're doing here is strengthening the actual joints between these sections. It's interesting to see this because we don't know if this is like a result of like testing data where they actually saw like lots of deflection in these arms, and so they wanted to like reinforce them, or if they're just being overly cautious. But if that's the case, then they're being drastically overly cautious because they're doing the entire arm, both arms. So massive, in my opinion, a massive amount of reinforcements to all of these areas. And beyond that, they're also working on the actual landing rail itself. So I definitely don't have pictures of that, but I
I
can.
think what they're doing with these doublers is they're trying to increase the um, potential for, or they're trying to keep these areas which would kind of be the most susceptible for bending under high load. So in case the booster comes in quicker than intended and maybe pulls an SN10, that it doesn't actually buckle these regions of the arms. That hopefully, if that is the case, the first thing that fails is the booster and not the arms themselves.
Right.
So this is probably not required for catching, and it's probably not informed from any of the testing they've done. This is probably purely a mathematical, physics calculation that tells them, if so many tons comes in, what is the breaking point of, the regions on the arms here, and so they're now increasing the strength in these specific areas.
Right. Yeah, and beyond this, okay, wrong direction again. Beyond this, they have also they took off the pads that were on the arms. Hold on, I still got that music playing in the background or audio. So they took off the pads that were on here during the testing of 14.1, and they've replaced. They're starting to replace them. They actually installed brackets all the way down the length of the rails. So it looks like they're going to be installing new pads along the full length of the rails here soon. And
We can actually see some of those, yeah, down on the ground. I believe they're further up to the right. Oh, yep, there they are.
There's a better image, I think, that gets them in some better lighting. Maybe this one. I think that was like literally the same image I was just looking at. Here we go. Yeah, so we can see different types of brackets that they have down here, and almost seems like they're testing out different designs, but I think there's just unique brackets for each position. But yeah, and they still have these pipes down here, so I think they're still. This may be related to another test that's coming up with the chopsticks, but yeah, I fully expect to see 14.1 come back out here for an additional test. But beyond that, I imagine they'll maybe put all the rest of those pads onto the landing rails, and definitely finish adding all of those doublers onto those joints. So, to people who think that SpaceX could launch in a week from now if they had permission to, I don't think that's the case. But I guess one thing I also want to address is just the fact that, while all of these reinforcements are happening to the chopsticks, a lot of people have, I don't know, kind of negative opinions about it, thinking that they're underprepared for this. And I think the thing to remember about all of this is that like these chopsticks were, in my opinion, they were designed to lift boosters and ships onto the launch mount, and catching boosters and ships is like an accessory. So like they had some of the accessories that were necessary in order to do that, like the landing rails themselves were actually installed, but they weren't. These were never in catch mode from the start. Like they probably knew that they had to upgrade the hydraulics. They probably knew that they would end up changing out the dampeners and linear actuators on the landing rails. Maybe the reinforcements are kind of something that is a bit of an afterthought, but also you have to consider the fact that they were intending to be lifting boosters that are 200 tons, not 270 ton boosters. So it does make sense with additional mass of the booster possibly means additional residual fuel on landing. So all of these numbers have changed. It's not like they did their math wrong. It's just that the numbers involved in that math has changed. So yeah, I think people should not be surprised to be seeing changes to infrastructure like this. It's rapid iteration, the same as it is on the actual vehicles themselves. So I don't think a lot of the doom and gloom and stuff is really necessary when it comes to this. I think they really kind of got this under control.
I think a lot of people have also assumed that they should swap out the arms for the shorter ones because that'll make the catch easier, which
Nope.
in some cases it could. It could provide more control authority over the arms given that there's less inertia. But the longer arms do give them a larger margin of error when it comes to the actual positioning of the boosters. So these arms are kind of a easy mode when it comes to catching, especially as it's going to be fairly fail-proof to actually catch the booster. And with all of the testing that we've seen, I mean, it's I've said this a couple of times on my X account, but catching is going to be a little bit easier than I think a lot of people realize. It really comes down to making sure that the actual cushioning components, that's mainly what they're focused on now, is that the actual cushioning at the end of the catch is appropriate. And so these longer arms will essentially decrease some of the other risk that comes with having shorter arms. So I think testing with the long arms, at least initially for maybe the first couple of catches, will actually provide a lot of benefit over the shorter arms.
Yeah, I agree. I can't even believe, honestly, I cannot imagine being like, oh no, let's do it on the shorter ones first. Like that sounds irresponsible to me. Um, yeah, I definitely, I still like the longer ones. I get why they want to go with the shorter ones. I don't really see too much of an issue with the whole bounce, other than it looking like it's not supposed to do that. Yeah, I like the extra margin that you have with the longer arms, especially with the ship. Like the booster, probably not such a big deal, but the ship, that's going to be just craziness in my opinion. Um, yeah. Anyways, I think we should take some questions since we're over our time right now. I definitely don't want this to extend to 3 hours. Still got a ton of stuff to do today. So Astro Joe, do we have any questions from the chat?
Sure do. I want to thank Astro Knucklehead for gifting a membership
Hold up.
first.
Did we lose sound again? I want to double check because I just saw
Oh,
somebody ask.
give us some 5x5s in chat, maybe.
Yeah.
Testing, testing. Is there
Yeah.
anybody out there?
There's like that 30-second delay. I think we're good. Cool.
All right, excellent. I want to thank Toby Bobby for gifting 5 memberships, as well as Just Martin with 5. Got a question from Cumulus Granitis. Would the top of OLIT-B be strong enough to support a crane to enable them to haul stuff up and down if needed, like the cranes that were on top of the Saturn V towers at Kennedy Space Center years ago?
Oh man. I'm sorry. Sorry for laughing. That just reminded me of the arguments that were going on for nearly a year about whether or not there was going to be a crane on top of the first integration tower. Yeah, I think surely they could put one if they wanted to, but I mean, like if anywhere they could go on these corners, but they haven't really showed a need for that, and I don't think we'll see it. Plus, it wouldn't be good on. And maybe it would be fine because it's kind of out of the way of where the plume is, if it's on these two sides. But yeah, I don't think there's necessarily a need for a crane on top of the tower.
Agreed. Question from Six String Simpleton. How does stacking time of this tower stack up against the other two? Nice pun there.
I know that this one is 41 days. I don't know what the first tower was.
I think a more important metric is given that this one has a lot of the equipment outfitted in it already, a lot of the pipes were pre-installed. So while the stacking, I believe, was definitely quicker, but it's also going to decrease the time after stacking in order to get it operational, which is another important thing to consider.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Question from Todd in Cabo. So are the grid fins still the backup in case the catch pins are not oriented properly to contact the arms?
The grid fins flex when the booster is going through thicker parts of the atmosphere quite heavily. They've added reinforcements above the grid fin receptacles on the barrel section. I personally don't think the grid fins could support the weight of a booster, let alone any residual mass. So if it gets to the point where the load points miss, the grid fins would provide some cushioning, but ultimately the booster is going to probably impact the ground. They would break off, and the booster would continue falling.
Well, I guess I have a question. Are the grid fins how much do the grid fins contribute to like drag on the way down? Probably not much, right? Or only when they're turned. I wonder how much force is actually being put on them as they're, you know, going Mach 3 through the atmosphere.
Given how they attach to the forward dome and the forward section and everything like that, I still think that there's a high likelihood that the grid fins would just rip off if the booster were to land on them.
Agreed. All right. Sorry about my background noise. Kids are very happy today. Got a good question from Crane Man. Are those blue pipes along the orbital berm the same as from the test stand at Massey's?
Yeah, I believe they are. They're the threaded rods that would allow them to do stress testing. They appear to be threaded together already to a specific length, so they're going to attach these to something and do some sort of pulling. We're just not quite sure what the fixturing for something like that looks like.
All right. Question from Jimmy Mack. With the weight of the weld doublers, how much does the arm momentum change in terms of movement and speed and stopping?
It's fairly close to the pivot point, so it's not going to add as much to it as if it were, clear at the ends of the arms.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. I want to thank Sharpie for $10 super chat for fuel costs and treats for Sunny. Team Liskonitis with another question. Will they program in an abort to ocean in case something goes south?
Well, I personally wouldn't think they had enough fuel to do that. But with the expanded landing tank capacity, it's a possibility that it could give them that option. I don't think aborting. I don't know. I mean, the reasons for aborting are more likely vehicle related, and in that case, like it would just not commit to the landing at all. I don't think you would have any like chopstick related issues because they should be testing the chopsticks to make sure they're still opening and closing like within the first like 2 minutes of launch. And same thing with the landing rails. So, the decision to abort, I think, would happen literally miles up in the air. And not last minute like that. Like I can't imagine something that would happen at that last minute that would make them abort.
Yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail just because I'm working on a video right now to kind of detail a lot of the catch related technical details. It's gonna be probably like 15 or 15 to 17 minutes long, but they're probably going to have multiple abort stages where if the booster is not gliding back to get close enough to land, then it will probably end up falling into the Gulf somewhere. And then as it gets closer to land, there's probably some additional checkpoints where they'll decide to steer it in a different direction if needed. But ultimately, if it gets to the position where the engines are to ignite, it's fairly full commit at that point. I've kind of hinted at this again, in posts on my X account. But it's going to be quite terrifying when people see this thing come in. It's going to be falling very quickly and ignite the engines very close to the ground. And by the time the engines ignite, it's pretty much going to be committed to a catch. So if the engines were to not start up properly, it's already going to be on a trajectory that puts it very close to the infrastructure. And I don't think there's going to be much of an opportunity for flying away. It's certainly not going to make it into the water, which I think is something that a lot of people are thinking. It's if it gets to ignition, there is absolutely no way that it is getting to the water.
All right, I'll take one last question, which I've been saving since about the beginning of the show from Missing Tools. Question for the Orbital Tank Farm. Is there currently a methane reclamation system in place? If so, how will we know CH4 is active without seeing venting from blue?
It's still there. It's just been moved. So, okay. So yeah, that recondenser that was over here, is now over here. Wait, there was two of them, right? So one's missing. Yeah, so there's two different reclamation systems. So there's one that is made for like maintaining the actual like tank farm itself. So like right now, it's probably working to keep these cooled as to the temperature that they want them to be at. And then there's also another one that is used during detanking. I guess technically there's three of them. Let me rethink this. No, sorry, there's two of them. So this is the one that I believe is used during detanking. So this is the temporary storage tanks that they detank into, and they, I think they flow mostly back to these at the beginning until they're receiving like liquid, and then they start sending the liquid back to the tanks, and then whatever's in here up until the point where they start receiving liquid back is when they will start using the liquefy the gaseous methane from here back into the tanks. I'm a little bit confused on this now since that one's gone, but it is this one that's right here. So I think it's basically they moved it to get it away from the launch mount and also to put it in between the two launch sites so that they can use it for both operations. Yeah. Brain's not working fully today. I've been up
Cody
since
G in chat mentions Tankenstein was moved. Blue recondenser was totally removed.
Yeah. So there's two of them. I'm gonna have to rewrap my brain around that. Today's not the day for it.
Nice. All right. Well, that's all the questions I got.
Awesome. Well, in that case, I guess that would be the end of our show today. Wanted to thank all of y'all for staying with us. We went over the time. I know that most of y'all aren't really bothered by that anyways, though. So thank you all for being here. Thanks for dealing with the technical problems that we had. If it didn't bother you too much, then do us a favor and hit that like button. Really appreciate all of your support. All the donations should help us be able to give Fred a nice tip. So thank you all for that. And also thanks to Ryan for helping me out today, and Astro Joe for doing questions and donations. And of course, shout out to Mauricio for getting up there every week to get these amazing images for us. It's been, man, my archive is about to approaching 4 years deep now, or 5 years deep now. So actually, I think it's more than that. But yeah, the most consistent person out there, in my opinion. So shout out to Mauricio, and thanks for all the hard work. And I guess with that, I will pass it off to Ryan.
Yep, thanks for joining us here today, guys. As you can see, there's a lot of cool stuff in progress. There's a lot of excitement, as you can tell from of our speculation. We're pretty excited about this new launch mount and what it may look like, as well as the future of all of the other systems around Starbase. So, every flyover we get more and more information, and we get closer and closer to really seeing what Starship is going to evolve into. So, thanks again to Mauricio and everybody for helping out today.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Zach and Ryan. Always a pleasure to be a part of the team with you guys on, sharing your knowledge and time with us. I appreciate you both. And thanks, Emlyn, for turning the knobs and pushing the buttons, trying to keep things active and going here for everybody during the technical difficulties. Thanks, Astrogen, my lovely wife, for scheduling and rounding up everybody for these shows, as well as moderating, and Rocket Prophet in chat, as well as Jeff A. And I'll echo all of those other sentiments for RGV team and everybody in the background that keeps everything rolling. All right, so most engines cut off, hot staging confirmed. Love you, bye.